Hi, I'm your host, Brent. Welcome to the Climate Guru, where we discuss pressing environmental issues, including with leading experts. Join us for insightful conversations to inform and inspire action in your everyday life. If Donald Trump is reelected president, what can we expect from his administration on climate change? And what would Kamala Harris's programs and policies be on climate change and the environment? The planet and all life on Earth is facing an existential threat from climate change. This election will be the most consequential for the future of life on Earth. The climate crisis is caused, as we know, by the greenhouse effect from the emissions by humans of carbon and other fossil fuels. Carbon increases causes temperature increases. The Earth's temperature has gone up almost 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit since industrialization. One of the biggest concerns about reaching 2 degrees Celsius is that global warming will become irreversible. Certain tipping points will be crossed, where forces unleashed will cause continuing heating of the planet for thousands of years. That's why scientists warn us there should be no more than a 1.5 degrees temperature rise, 1.5 degrees Celsius, and in any case, never more than 2 degrees Celsius. Right now, we're at 1.4 degrees Celsius. We only have 0.1 degrees to reach the dangerous level of 1.5 degrees. The country today with the most carbon emissions is China, with 32% of the world's total emissions each year. The United States is in second place, even though we only have 4.5% of the world's population. We emit 14% of the annual global greenhouse gas emissions. That's why it's so important to have a president and administration that reduces our emissions, helps us transition to renewables, and leads the world in reducing carbon emissions and transferring to more climate-friendly production systems. The United States must reduce its emissions, cutting in half by 2030 and reaching net zero by 2050. We must lead the world in reducing greenhouse gas emissions by our own commitment. As an example, we also must lead the world in spreading technology to transition to renewable energy sources. Donald Trump called climate change a hoax and questions the relationship between human activity and climate change. His campaign slogan is "Drill, Baby, Drill." In April of 2024, he hosted oil executives at Mar-a-Lago, including ExxonMobil and the American Petroleum Institute lobbying arm. He asked for a $1 billion campaign contribution from big oil in exchange for a rollback of any rules that would affect their profitability that was passed before. He rolled back more than 100 environmental laws and rules. He weakened the Obama CO2 emissions from power plants rule and cars and trucks. 4 months after he became president, Trump withdrew from the 2015 Paris Climate Accords, in which virtually all the world's nations pledged to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and if possible, pursue efforts to cap warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. He rolled back the Obama Clean Era Power Plan. He opened up areas on land and offshore for drilling, opened up public land to increase logging, mining, and fossil fuel drilling. Trump's head of the EPA and other key environmental positions were all executives of fossil fuel companies. Trump repealed or weakened regulations on clean air, water, and land use, rolled back endangered species protections and national forest protections, rolled back marine protected areas, clean water regulations, rolled back bans on toxic chemicals, migratory bird species, and took measures to compromise the National Environmental Policy Act, which is a critical law which requires federal regulation before any infrastructure occurs to review its effect on biodiversity and climate change. Trump wants to replace staffers from federal agencies with embedded loyalists to scale back the government's effort to fight climate change. His conservative U.S. Supreme Court supermajority has curbed the government's ability to impose environmental regulations on private industry. These new changes made by the Supreme Court might allow government to repeal California's authority to make its own stricter gas mileage regulations. That is the most progressive, and 17 states and many auto manufacturers follow. The 2025 project was written by the Heritage Foundation, the right-wing think tank, and the closest of Trump's White House advisors. It's funded in large part by Charles Koch, the oil and gas magnate. The 2025 project states that the federal government has an obligation to develop vast oil and gas and coal resources on public lands. Joe Biden administration passed the most comprehensive and largest climate change mitigation laws in history. This is called the Inflation Reduction Act. Almost $400 billion to help the country transition away from fossil fuels. The 2025 plan says we will withdraw from the Inflation Reduction Act, we will abrogate it, and we won't need to purge climate fanaticism. Trump wants to erase the findings by the court that the federal government has the right to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from most sources. He wants to weaken the EPA that was created in the 1970s under a Republican president, Richard Nixon, along with the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. As we recall in the recent debate between Trump and Biden, Trump was asked by the moderators, what is your environmental and climate change policies? He completely ignored the question, talked about something else. If we look at some quotations from Project 2025 being developed by Trump Inner Circle, it says, quote, the EPA has been a breeding ground for the expansion of the federal government's influence and control across the economy. Embedded activists have sought to evade legal restraints in pursuit of a global climate-themed agenda. It states, in the EPA, there's been a return to fear-based rhetoric, especially as it pertains to the perceived threat of climate change. The plan takes aim at the EPA's authority to tackle global warming, including by revisiting a 2009 scientific finding by the EPA that says that carbon dioxide emissions endanger public health. The plan wants to weaken the Clean Water Act. It also calls for eliminating the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice, which focuses on reducing pollution in low-income and minority areas. At a critical moment, when we are quickly running out of time to sharply decrease fossil fuel emissions before we reach dangerous tipping points to become irreversible increases in temperature over hundreds of years, Trump's policies would do just the opposite. They would erase all the important progress we've made to transition to renewables and away from dangerous greenhouse gases. Trump has stated he wants to redouble the drilling of oil and gas and even coal. Joseph Biden called climate change an existential threat. Not only did he rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one, but he's done everything to strengthen the international agreement. The Inflation Reduction Act, passed by the Biden administration with the support of Congress, is the most sweeping law that pumps almost $400 billion into incentives for clean energy, electric vehicles, and enacted a suite of tough regulations to sharply reduce emissions from the burning of oil, gas, and coal. It's the most ambitious investment in combating climate crisis in world history. It includes historic investments in environmental justice. It provides funding to monitor fence-line communities. The Act promotes renewable energy sources such as wind and solar and aims to dramatically increase their use in the coming years. It provides funding for programs that help communities become more resilient to the impacts of climate change, such as drought, heat, and extreme weather. If Kamala Harris, Democrat, is elected president, she's expected to protect and expand the Biden landmark climate and environmental achievements, the biggest in history. We can expect Harris to continue commitment to the Paris Agreement, executive actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, clean energy and renewable energy, electric vehicle incentives and infrastructure development, environmental justice initiatives, climate resilience and adaptation funding, green infrastructure investments, sustainable agriculture and reduction of plastic, protection of water and quality resources. She will strengthen fuel economy standards. Kamala Harris has a long record before becoming vice president as a public official, as an advocate for environmental protections and reducing greenhouse gases. She would be expected to continue the Biden climate policies. When Kamala Harris was the California Attorney General, she made the environment a top concern and prosecuted polluters. As a senator, she was a strong supporter and sponsor of the Green New Deal that the United States should transition to 100% clean energy within a decade. The League of Conservation Voters, which scores members of Congress on their environmental record, gave her a score of 100% as an advocate for the environment. When Donald Trump was president, the League of Conservation Voters gave him a failing score, and he was called the dirtiest of all time. When Harris ran for president in 2020, she advocated a climate plan to increase spending by $10 trillion over a decade. She advocated tax on carbon by producers and emitters with the money returned to households. Economists say that a carbon tax is the most effective way to make industry reduce carbon emissions. She also advocated a ban on hydraulic fracking, a technique that injects water and chemicals into the ground to create pressure to force the release of oil and gas. It dangerously pollutes the air and groundwater. As vice president, she cast a tie-breaking vote in 2022 to pass the Biden landmark Inflation Reduction Act. As vice president, Harris flew to the 2023 UN Climate Summit in Dubai, where she told world leaders that the urgency of this moment is clear. The clock is no longer ticking, it's banging. We must make up for lost time. She said, around the world, there are those who seek to slow or stop our progress, leaders who deny climate science, delay climate action, and spread misinformation. She said, quote, in the face of their resistance and in the context of this moment, we must do more. Thank you, Climate Guru, signing out. Thanks for tuning in to the Climate Guru podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and keep taking action for our planet's future. Until next time, and remember, together we can make a difference.